The ads are moving into heavy rotation and point to a rough and tumble race for the U.S. Senate. Republican John James is here to talk about his battle with incumbent Gary Peters. And schools and universities point to reopening plans for the fall, even as the coronavirus is spiking in many states. Can we really make plans for the fall now? Today is Sunday, June 28, 2020, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. We continue to travel through the summer of 2020 as if we were driving through the rain without any windshield wipers. It has been a blur, and it's not easy to make out the road in front of us. The 4th of July is next weekend. That seems hard to believe. How can we be that deep in the summer when we didn't even have fireworks last week? Well, among the many things that COVID-19 has affected is the practice of the political arts. The president's rally in Tulsa was a pretty good example of how different things are going to be for the time being, and candidates are going to have to be pretty creative to get the electorate fired up and active. Today, we're going to dial in on the race for the U.S. Senate in Michigan. Businessman and veteran John James is running for Senate again, as he did 2 years ago. He lost to Debbie Stabenow then, and now taking a shot at the other Senate seat. Incumbent Democrat Gary Peters holds it now. John James is going to join me in just a minute to talk about all the issues in the race. A little later on, I'm going to be joined by the president of Wayne State University, Dr. Imroy Wilson. All schools are trying to figure out a path forward in the age of coronavirus, but few have as their president a public health specialist and an epidemiologist who came to Wayne State after working for the NIH. Is getting students back into campus the right decision? We're going to ask him that and more today on Flashpoint. All right, let's start this morning with politics and the race for the U.S. Senate seat that's currently occupied by Democrat Gary Peters. Republican John James was introduced to Michigan voters 2 years ago in his race against Debbie Stabenow. So the introduction's not nearly as necessary this time around. And yet, no shaking hands, no kissing babies in campaign 2020. What do you do? Good to have with us John James joining us via Zoom today. John, good to have you back on Flashpoint. Thanks very much for the time.
Thanks for having me, Devin.
Let me start with this conundrum of trying to campaign at a time like this. I receive a lot of emails from the Democratic Party saying to me, where is John James? I will also point out I get a lot of emails from the Republican Party saying, where is Joe Biden? I'm not sure where any of you are supposed to be right now, given the problems that we have, but talk a little bit about what it's like to campaign right now.
Well, our first and foremost concern is always for the health and safety of our friends and family and neighbors. I actually have been saying for quite some time that we need to prioritize people over politics, and by staying home and staying safe and abiding by guidelines is exactly what we've been doing for the past few months. And in the meantime, not only have we been conducting interviews throughout the process is way back when we could do the last in-person events up in Marquette, but also Zoom interviews and engaging with personal phone calls. We've been using our blessings to be a blessing to others. From the campaign side, our nickel promise. Last year, we used a nickel for every dollar we raised to help feed the homeless, to help clothe the naked, to help our veterans. And we've been able to give over $500,000 away over the course of the past year. And over the past few months, namely help during the COVID crisis, $200,000 to an integrated health facility in Detroit that was hardest hit by COVID. From my business, we were able to do what we could to keep our customers whole and keep our employees safe and distribute hundreds of thousands of meals and cleaning supplies and PPE. And we're just doing what we can to focus on what was most important. And the time for politics will come. And but just engaging, having interviews like this when we have the opportunity. So
well, it's interesting. It's good to hear that there's money going out. Usually campaigns are about bringing money in, and you're spending money on other things, which is good. But let me ask you, let me get into some politics here. A friend of mine saw you in a store recently, and you were wearing a mask, and you just talked about keeping people safe. We've arrived at a time where somehow a mask has become very politicized. I'm curious about your thoughts on the way the coronavirus battle is being carried out now in political ways.
I think that our priority needs to always be keeping those who are most vulnerable among us safe and abiding by guidelines that are put out by experts. I think that there are two crises going on right now, at least two. One, a health crisis, and another, an economic crisis. And it's incumbent upon our leaders to manage both effectively. We need to make sure that we do everything that we can to keep our friends, family, and neighbors, and our employees, and those in our charge safe. We can never be perfect, but we can try to be better. Washing our hands, wearing masks, maintaining the guidelines for engagement, and not necessarily exceeding those, and doing what we can to function, to try to walk and chew gum at the same time, but as safely and as sensibly as possible.
Well, we saw the president holding a political rally in Tulsa where very few people were wearing masks. The president has, as we know, been very steadfast about not wearing a mask, at least not that we see very often in public. I'm wondering if you find that very helpful, or should he be wearing a mask?
I don't have a problem wearing a mask. In fact, when the president came to talk to African American community leaders right after the COVID crisis that hurt the African American community disproportionately in Detroit, I actually wore a mask in that meeting out of respect for the folks who were around me in that meeting, and also for my family and friends who I'd be coming in contact with. I do my best, and I'm not perfect, but I do my best to be as healthy and safe, and doing, the elbow bump or like the air hug, and when we're engaging with people. But again, I'm doing what I can, and to try to keep my family and my friends healthy and safe, abiding by guidelines, and holding events outside when we have them.
I can appreciate you not necessarily wanting to criticize the president on this front, but when you ran 2 years ago, you spoke a lot about how much you supported the president, how much you were behind his policies and what he's doing. He's, of course, far less popular now in Michigan, at least according to the polls. And I'm wondering where you feel you are in your alliance with President Trump as you now run to be a partner of his in the U.S. Senate.
So I'm going to correct you on that. The only partner of mine is my wife, Elizabeth James. This is the biggest problem in politics, Devin, and this is where I'm going to need your help and your journalist colleagues out there. Is that everybody wants to make this about President Trump, and this needs to be more about Michigan. This needs to be more about Detroit. A lot of the problems that we're facing preceded the president and will succeed him unless we get our acts together. Every question I get about President Trump, and I've said the same thing for years, that I can agree with the president without worshiping him, and I can disagree without attacking. Right now, there are wild dogs running around in the streets and trees growing through houses. There's a digital divide. Our kids are drinking poisonous water. We need to fix our health care. Democrats are lying about me on that front. So let's focus on things that Michigan hear about, because either in 4 months or 4 years, we're going to be talking about a different president. We need to make sure that Michigan is stronger, and I'm the leader to make sure that we fix the errors that Senator Peter either hasn't addressed because of his ineffectiveness, and that's what I'm going to focus on, Michigan. I hope you will too.
I do want to focus on Michigan. In fact, let's talk a little bit about health care, which is clearly, we see now how critical health care is, if we didn't know that before, in the middle of a pandemic. But you say that you've wanted to repeal Obamacare, and yet at the same time you say that you're in favor of protecting people with pre-existing conditions. A lot of people have come to believe that those two things cannot exist at the same time, that that's what Obamacare was. The Affordable Care Act only was able to protect people with pre-existing conditions because it relied on everybody being in the pool. That's the only way to amortize the costs of covering everyone. And the President's Justice Department is trying to strip protections for pre-existing conditions out of this law in many states. How do you square those?
Well, we better make doggone sure that we have more people in the Republican Party who are going to protect folks with pre-existing conditions. I've said this for years as well, Devin, that we must protect folks with pre-existing conditions. I actually called Debbie Stabenow for fibbing, and I corrected her twice, and people haven't picked up on that. When I mentioned my feelings about Obamacare, it was within the context of making sure that we fix the parts that are broken and we keep the parts that don't. I was upset by the fact that people who work for me were taken off of the choices that they had, and we had to increase our health care, decrease their choices, and I take that very personally. The people who work for me, Devin, are on the same health care as my kids who are playing outside right now. We have to protect those with pre-existing conditions. I've said this over and over and over, and we need to make sure that we're reporting those facts because people need to hear them because Democrats are lying about that.
Some people believe that this pandemic, though, has shown us the failure of having a system where your health care is only as good as your job, with so many people losing work. Has this changed your feelings at all about a universal health care system?
You're illustrating my point, and I'm excited about this. I say that we need to have a market-based, patient-centered approach. I think that your health care should belong to you, not to the federal government, not to insurance companies. We need to increase transparency so you have all the information. We need to increase competition so you have the choice. And we need to make sure that we get the tort reform and the regulatory reform to lower your pharmaceutical drug costs. And then we begin to increase access to telemedicine, bridge the digital divide, and make sure that we're getting better solutions, more innovation, lowering pharmaceutical drug costs, repatriating pharmaceutical manufacturing so China doesn't hold us accountable. And these are all things that Gary Peters has failed to deliver on his watch. These are things that we can't wait for. These are extremely important. And I'm going to be delivering those when I'm working for you on the floor of the United States Senate for the next 6 years.
I will leave the broader debate as to whether a market-based approach can get us all of that, because I do want to.
Go ahead. Sure. I have my car, right? I drive it around, and it's something that belongs to me. My house, my apartment is something that I have, is something that belongs to me. I think that my healthcare insurance should be something that belongs to me. I believe that right now, what Democrats are proposing is something that the government would give you. And
well, the question, I guess, becomes: is everyone entitled to health care?
I believe that healthcare is critical concern for everybody, and everybody should have safe, quality, affordable healthcare. And the way to do that is by increasing transparency, increasing competition, and through tort reform, regulatory reform, and executing on this, and not just talking about it. And it's certainly not increasing government control. We need to make sure that we, as individual citizens, have the choices and control to make the decisions about our own lives. And then when we have an accident or we get sick, it doesn't bankrupt us, Devin. So I think that these are all things that can be worked out if you put the partisanship aside and recognize that we need to start taking care of people.
That's been elusive, putting partisanship aside. I want to obviously move to, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the race problems that have riven America over these last couple of months. I know you must weary of being treated as sort of a unicorn, the black Republican, as you're often described. But at a time like this right now, with race tensions as high as they've been, I'm really curious of whether or not you've developed a prescription for fixing this wound that we have never been able to heal in America.
I think a great start is by making sure that we have better representation in the United States Senate. I believe that representation matters, Devin. I believe that if we'd been successful the first time, not only would we have an African-American, a black male from Detroit representing us in this police reform debate, I'd be leading it. I would be representing the people of the state of Michigan. I'd be representing African Americans who for so long have been fighting the power, and now we have the opportunity to become the power. Right now, we vote 95% in one party, Democrat Party. Yeah. And that ensures that neither party works for our vote. Both parties have failed black people. And that is why nothing is changing for black people. The Republican Party doesn't even try, and Democrats neglect us. We need to make sure that we force both parties to treat us the way they're genuflecting for working class white males and for college educated women. And for our Jewish friends, they need to work like that for us. We need to think independently. I'm an independent thinker who was raised with conservative values by a pair of Democrats from the Jim Crow South. I'm in the Republican Party, not because the Republican Party blows my skirt up, but because my values economically and morally align more closely with their platform. Now, how can we change what is currently going on in the party? We need to do it from the inside. We need to make sure that we have a seat at both tables, and we need to make sure that we have influence. And so that regardless of what happens, that we can continue this slide that we've seen where African Americans are left on the outside.
John, I've only got about 100 questions left that we didn't get to, but I trust that means that we will hopefully have a future conversation to continue this. And I also hope that we will be able to get you and Gary Peters together for a couple of conversations together.
Oh, enough. I'm looking forward to it.
You got it. Thanks so much for being with us, John. We come back, we'll talk about the plans for reopening universities. Are they a little too hasty? This is Flashpoint on Local 4.
The biggest 4th of July mattress sale ever starts now at Gardner White. Savings up to $1,000 on the largest selection of Serta mattresses. Right now, Serta Perfect Sleeper with adjustable base just $5.99. iComfort for $12 a month. Plus, free power bases, free delivery, and we say yes to credit with 0% financing up to 60 months. The biggest 4th of July mattress sale starts now at Gardner White, Detroit's new #1 mattress store.
As temperatures skyrocket and your AC feels the pressure, now is the perfect time to insulate. Don't suffer through a hot house and high energy bills. Insulate now and cut your energy bill up to 50% with Ace & Sons.
Call today and get 15% off installation.
There's a reason we have more cars, more brands, and more selection than any other dealer in Michigan. The reason is you. With 43 Michigan locations and 34 different brands, the Suburban Collection has more ways to make your purchase, service, and overall automotive experience the best in Michigan. From your first car to your dream car, and everything in between. Go to drivesuburban.com and get your car today.
Recent statistics show a large percentage of Michiganders can save over $1,000 a year by refinancing. Call 248-308-5000 or chat with us online at davidhallmortgage.com. Lower payments, better options, more personal attention.
All right, earlier this spring, we talked with Wayne State University President Dr. Imroy Wilson about the pandemic and its impact on the school and students and faculty. Matters of public health get Dr. Wilson back to his roots as an epidemiologist. So now, with schools from kindergarten to grad schools mapping out their plans for the fall, I thought it was a good time to check in again. And Wayne State President Imroy Wilson joins us now via Zoom. President Wilson, good to have you back again. I'm wondering now, it's been about a month and a half, I believe, since you and I last spoke. I'm wondering what you feel like we now know about the virus as we keep learning a little bit more about it. Do you feel more comfortable with what this is that we're wrestling with, or is it as mysterious as ever?
I think it's as mysterious as ever. I mean, certainly we're learning more things all the time, but some of the things we're learning are new. For example, you heard the case just last week about 3 triplets, I think, that was born with COVID-19.
Yeah.
And then, early on, we thought that young people, college-age people, and a little bit older were less likely to get it. Now we know that that demographic is just as susceptible as any other age group for getting this virus. Now, their course may not be as bad. They don't tend to get as sick. But in terms of actually getting the virus, those in their late 20s and in early 30s are getting it just as frequently as some of the older people.
Well, and as we now watch universities who really, obviously, we all understand that the campus culture is a big part of the university experience. I understand the rush. Everybody wants to have people back on campus, and we've seen quite a few schools announce exactly that. Most of them in our state. Your plan is going to be coming up in about 2 weeks or so, July 15th, on exactly what's going to happen at Wayne. But are you worried that people are making plans right now that look a little hasty, given that we just had the largest day of cases this past week that we've seen since back in April?
I am, and there's a university back east, I won't name it, that just within the past 8 days had 79 confirmed cases of their students getting COVID-19. And this is the summer. This isn't even the school year, but 79 in 8 days. I mean, that's a huge number. So I am a bit concerned, and that's why we've been very measured and have I said from the very beginning that we weren't going to make any definitive decisions until as late as possible based on the science and based on the public health at that time. And the latest possible for us means probably mid-July, and that's why we picked July 15th. Luckily, Detroit and Michigan in general, but Detroit specifically has been doing a lot better than some other parts of the country.
Yeah.
We got hit pretty hard initially, but a lot of states now are experiencing what we experienced in April, and we're definitely have had 9, 10, 11 weeks of decreased cases, decreased deaths, and percent positivity is certainly going in the right direction also. So that augurs well for us being able to be a little bit more aggressive than we would have thought probably, a month and a half ago when I first spoke to you. But even that, we're still being very, very cautious.
Well, I'd like to ask you, I've been asking everybody with any expertise in this field a question, though, about Michigan's mortality rate, which is so much higher than just about any place else we can find in the country, somewhere between 9 and 10%, rather than the less than 1% that we generally expect to see. You got any explanation or understanding of why our death rate has been so much higher?
Well, I think early on, that was spurred by the fact that the death rate in Detroit, with its minority population, particularly African American, was so high. But if you look at the data now, the absolute deaths in Detroit is only about 0.6 per million population. So it's gone down dramatically. I think that the data is skewed by the huge amount of the disproportionate impact on minority populations and Detroit's large minority population early on.
And the fact that we were hit so early as we were still trying to figure out best practices. We've watched, as I just mentioned with John James, and we've been talking about this quite a bit, the politicization of the mask seems very strange. But do you see any reason why, for instance, on college campuses, can you see not having people being asked to wear masks when they come back to school?
No, that's going to be mandatory for us. If you're in a closed environment in any of our buildings, you're going to have to wear a mask, period. It's what's the safest thing to do. It's going to be the best practice in terms of infecting others. And so even if you yourself don't feel like it's protective of yourself, certainly you've got to think about others, and it's just the right thing to do.
K through 12 schools, of course, are very community-driven, community-based, and you're talking about a very small, even in some cases, just a couple of blocks worth of where people come to school. Not the case at all with universities. You got people that coming to go to school from all over the country, all over the state, all over the country, and in other cases all over the world. What do you do? What do you do about all of that influx of all of these people bringing with them all of the interactions that they've had for the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think that there just has to be certain policies that everybody has to follow. One of them is the mask, as we talked about. The other one is social distancing, limiting the ability of students to gather in certain social gatherings. And testing and contact tracing are going to be very important. We're going to do a lot of that as students come back on campus.
Can you see everything that you know about public health? Can you see any way around the fear that many have that come late fall, early winter, we are in for another outburst, whether we want to call it the second surge or whatever it is, but the way that the flu season typically works? Any way around that?
I've said all along from the very beginning that we're going to have a second surge. It's just a matter of what the timing is going to be. I predicted sometime in, later in the fall, but I think with things I'm seeing right now with the surge in various states, the impact perhaps of the protests, the impact of most states opening up, maybe prematurely in some cases, I think it's going to be quicker. Most of the the states that are having major problems right now, I'm talking about Arizona, Florida, Texas, as these cases have surged about 2 to 6 weeks after opening up. And so, we're not out of the woods yet.
Yeah,
I think that,
unfortunately not. I got to leave it there. I got to get to a break. But Dr. Wilson, so good to talk to you again, and we will talk to you again soon.
Okay, see you now. Bye-bye.
We'll be back with more in just a minute on Flashpoint.
The 4th of July sale starts now at Gardner White. Save an extra 15% off with 0% for 20 months, and we pay your tax. Or we say yes to credit with 0% for 60 months. The 4th of July sale at Gardner White, Detroit's new #1 furniture store.
There's a reason we have more cars, more brands, and more selection than any other dealer in Michigan. The reason is you. With 43 Michigan locations and 34 different brands, the Suburban Collection has more ways to make your purchase, service, and overall automotive experience the best in Michigan. From your first car to your dream car, and everything in between. Go to drivesuburban.com and get your car today.
Joe's Produce Gourmet Market in Livonia welcomes summer in the city. The time has arrived for the smell of burgers, steaks, and kebabs sizzling on the grill. Just baked Asiago buns and a frosty beer make the perfect complement. A garden of choices, fruit trays, fresh vegetables, and an array of decadent desserts. Just chillin' and grillin'. Go to Joe's Produce Gourmet Market in Livonia for every summer celebration.
Life is what you make it at Joe's.
The biggest 4th of July mattress sale ever starts now at Gardner White. Save up to $1,000. Your choice, Beauty Rest Black or Tempur-Pedic, just $19 a month. The 4th of July sale at Gardner White, Detroit's new #1 mattress store.
Kick off this 4th of July weekend with a bang. The Henry Ford, Detroit Symphony Orchestra, and Local 4 are bringing the patriotic spirit straight to your living room with Salute to America, with classic performances from the DSO and a special performance by the Voices' Beth Griffith Manley, hosted by Jason Carr and Tati Amara.
We'll bring you all the magic of these DSO performances.
From right here in Greenfield Village.
Salute to America, Friday at 8 p.m., only on Local 4.
Quick programming note, this Friday evening at 8, I hope you'll join us for Salute to America, an evening of patriotic music from the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, hosted by Jason Carr and Tati Amari from Greenfield Village at the Henry Ford. It'll definitely get you in the 4th of July spirit. Thanks for being here this morning. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Flashpoint.